look to the future together, and I want to do that in a moment, but I'm wondering, let's start with yesterday. What does the polling tell us about what public support will be for Justin Trudeau's decision to resign?
Well, we certainly saw from the polls that were conducted over the holidays and at the end of December that the announcement that Justin Trudeau made yesterday was almost inevitable. The poll tracker, which we're running for the CBC, has the Conservatives around 24 points ahead of the Liberals, and this was before the news from yesterday. So Justin Trudeau had pushed the party down into a position where not only they were on track to being defeated in an election campaign, but were actually at risk of falling into third, maybe even fourth in the seat count behind the Bloc Québécois and the New Democrats. So it was, in a way, almost inevitable that it was going to end up here. And while it is very soon after the announcement to know exactly what impact it is going to have, we have seen a few numbers out this morning that suggest that it could change things up quite a bit.
Okay, pause on that note. Can we just talk about seats for a moment? If you're talking about that gap with the Conservatives in a dominant position now, 24%, you said, ahead of the Liberals. In terms of how that would translate into seat projections, where does that leave us, Eric, if an election were held today?
Well, it would put the Conservatives in really a historic position. The most seats any party has ever won in an election was Brian Mulroney in 1984 and won 211 seats. Right now, the Conservatives, if the election were held today, would win somewhere around 227. That is 50 more than 50 more than they would need to form a majority government. The Liberals would win somewhere around 40 to 45 seats. Exactly the same position that the Bloc Québécois would be in, so we could see shades of 1993, the Bloc Québécois as the official opposition, and the NDP winning somewhere between 25 and 30 seats. So it really would be that the Conservatives would just double the seat count that they currently have and win just this massive, massive majority and put the Liberals back to really where they were before Justin Trudeau became leader.
Bearing that in mind, when he took over as leader, they were third-party status, and then in 2015, he vaulted them to that majority. In the next election, the numbers changed slightly. So 342 is the number of seats after the next election. 172 would be needed for a majority in that context. And you're talking, as you say, more than 50 seats ahead of that, based on how that would translate. You said something in your earlier comment about public view against the Prime Minister, how the Prime Minister has pushed the party down in the polls. We will see soon enough whether it's animus against the Prime Minister himself or if it's something more, policies, the party itself. Would you expect to see that reflected in the short term in the polling, Eric?
I do think so, because we saw that there was one poll that's conducted by Pollster. It was done just in the hours after the announcement, and already saw that the Liberals were doing a little bit better than they had been doing previously. Not enough to really change the outcome of an election. The Conservatives would still win a big majority government. But this particular poll more or less had a 3-to-1 advantage for people saying they were satisfied to see Justin Trudeau resign as Prime Minister. So I do think that we might see a small bump for the Liberals in the interim. That is not unusual. We often see that when an unpopular leader resigns, the party suddenly looks a lot better because voters are able to put whoever they imagine would be the best possible leader in there. It does change quite a bit when you get into a position where you have a real leader in place, and that's not going to please everybody.
When you say it's not enough for it to really do anything long-term for the Conservative fortunes at this point, is there? That's a big question for many. Is there enough time? If there should be a Liberal leadership race in the next, between now and middle of March, for example, for the party to turn things around before a vote?
It would be possible, I'd say, with the short timeline we're looking at, because based on just how things are looking, we'd be in an election day, a voting day, in the first couple of weeks of May. That's not a lot of time to change a 20 to 25 point lead for the Conservatives. Is it enough time to whittle it down to a position where the election is somewhat competitive, that maybe a minority government would be more in play rather than a majority? That's always possible. But a 20 to 25 point lead after 10 years in power, a lot of the opinions that Canadians have about the Liberal Party is pretty baked in, and a lot of the leadership contestants we've seen are pretty closely associated with that government. And I think that will be a big challenge.
We heard, even in introducing you, heard the voice of some of the voters there about time for a change. That seems to be a prevailing attitude right now as well. Let's just conclude with a look to the possible successors. Of course, there is no formal leadership race underway, but unofficially already underway. Is anything showing up in terms of the polling? Possible successors? Who's most likely in terms of Canadians' minds right now?
The favorite would be Chrystia Freeland from the polling that we've seen. She is the most well-known cabinet minister. Her recognition levels are higher than former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, for example. But I'd say that these numbers are very preliminary because the vast majority of the potential contestants are largely unknown to most Canadians. So a lot of the polling that we're seeing about who Canadians would prefer to see as Justin Trudeau's replacement is more a reflection of who people have heard of. So until we get closer to the actual leadership vote date, whenever that will be, I think we'll have a better idea of how Canadians might react to it. For now, Chrystia Freeland, who made a big splash certainly before the holidays, is the best known candidate. So she would come out as the front runner in terms of Canadians' views. How are Liberal Party members, however that is going to work, we don't quite know just yet, but how are they going to react to the potential candidates? That is a completely different question. So Freeland starts out as the front runner if she decides to run, but I would not say that she is by any means a runaway favorite.
Eric, the first of what will doubtless be many conversations over the weeks and months to come, and I'm delighted to have you in this morning. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Éric Grenier, the founder of TheWrit.ca.